Hey, how's it going, guys? It is Zimzilla99 coming back at you once again. Thank you all for coming in. Nice. How's it going, Alice? Yes, Kaijunot. It is a Zimcast. Zimcast 96. We have Zimcast 97 to 98 planned. 97's already been posted, but we're waiting on getting sure everything in 98 is all prepped. And then Zimcast 99. That's going to be the big one. I need to set aside time for that because I want to do something special for Zimcast 99 because obviously we got to keep brand recognition, all that fun stuff. So the 99 stream is the special one, not Zimcast 100, but I'll do something special for 100 as well. Antonio, what's it going? What's up? What's up? Let's go. Thank you so much, Minecraft. Swaff, thank you. And Sea Monster Essays, how's it going? We've gone through some crazy stuff recently. We had a big YouTuber kind of swinging his big YouTuber balls around, thinking that he's the best of the best and that he's king of shit mountain, I guess. Whoops, did I swear already? Well, oh well. It is what it is, but it's really interesting to see what happens when smaller YouTubers kind of end up entering bigger YouTubers territory and all the shenanigans that come across because of that. But yeah. Woo! Indeed, you made it. Thank you, Leisure King Productions. If anyone is interested, he's been working on some stuff with his King Toronto stuff, as well as his, I guess, can't really call it the G word, but it is his speculative atomic evolution projects. Those figures are going to be coming out soon as well. I know I'll definitely have to pick up one myself. But yeah, the Godzilla, another Godzilla Unscripted that's going to be coming out soon. I'm working on that either today or tomorrow. But yeah, speaking of other things to look forward to, new shirt. So Vic is generous enough to allow me to use the Chibi Zim, the Chibi Zokra, as a shirt. So come up with a caption for anyone who is a big follower of the channel or has followed all the Zimcast. If there is a quote or a caption that you think would be appropriate for the little Chibi Zim to have below him, because I love Vic. I'm generous that he is allowing me to use the design here, but I don't want to just put up the design. I feel like that would be almost stealing, even though he's giving me permission to do it. But I want to come up with something that's like at least appropriate for Zimcast. And yeah, movie fan might be the one. Or like, I am a movie fan. Or sorry, it's not a Marvel. Actually, I think I just came up with the idea. Sorry, it's not a Marvel movie fan or something to that effect. I think that'd be fun. So movie fan, I think, is in the running. But if anyone else has any like ideas or quotes from the streams or from the videos that you've seen that would be appropriate for Chibi Zogra to say, please definitely put it in the chats or definitely put it in the comments so I'll be able to see it, because going through the chat sometimes is a little bit harder afterwards. I haven't seen this video, but I know he wants Jet Jaguar in the Monsterverse, so he automatically is an op. I mean, could you do Jet Jaguar in the Monsterverse? Yes, you could almost always do anything, but would it be good? That's the question. Where would you say your character on your logo scales to? My character can definitely beat up Godzilla. That's what I'll say. And hello, hi, is Godzilla evolved? And awesome job, Antonio. You and Vic are doing his drawcast today. So hopefully I'm not intruding too much on that, but I'm going to probably make this like a shorter stream, probably only an hour or so. Plus, I'm working with a new format. So before we ever get into the videos, I want to like do some posts and stuff to hype up some things as well as show up some things in the community. So besides, obviously, Chibi Zogra shirt and coming with a caption, where you can follow me. So outside of obviously YouTube, which is where most of you guys are, I'm on Twitch, Odyssey, and BitChute for backlogs in case Toho or YouTube end up being too floopy and my uploads just get taken down. Any art you see gets posted to DeviantArt as well as Instagram. And then if you want to hear my thoughts about things, or probably one of the easiest ways to contact me is either through my Discord, obviously, or Twitter/X and Instagram. So shameless plug, we got a shameless plug around here. That's the only way that us YouTubers, a smaller fry, can make a living, because we don't have the inbuilt audience. And of course, I know you guys are always super busy, but you guys take the time out of your wonderful days to come see me. But Yeah, and I don't have it here, but if you guys are interested, definitely do join the Discord. It's always popping there, more people, more discussions. And I recently put a marketplace tab. So if anyone's got any figures that they want to sell or want to trade for people, those are going to be there. There's a few listings. Vic and a few other people have shown some stuff that's pretty cool stuff. I know I'm poor myself at the moment, which is why I'm shamelessly plugging. But if you guys see figures that you like, definitely like buy some stuff from those guys, get some connections, or if you have stuff yourself you want to sell, the marketplace is there for that, and it's all easy to navigate. So be a part of the Zim community. My Zims. I'm still thinking of a name for that, unfortunately. But speaking of other things to show, my shameless promotions, Kaiju Quarantine. It's a novella novel. We'll see how long it gets that I'm working on. So art commentary. So it's like going over the design process of this monster, which includes like exclusive videos as well as chapter segments and maybe other stuff, models, maybe things like that. Those are going to be all on the Patreon, so definitely become a patron. The first post is free. Some things are going to be free, some things will not. But even at the lowest tier of patrons, you'll be able to see everything. Plus, there's more exclusive things just for the Discord and in general on the channel that you guys will get to get if you become a higher tier patron. I am here by the generous support of viewers like you. Thank you. PBS taught me well. But yeah, so I'm happy that there's going to be stuff going on the Patreon there, but I'm really excited to share what's going on with that project. And definitely the patrons will be sort of the beta readers as well as people who give a lot of advice as to where that story will go. But on to the topic at hand. We almost hit 10 minutes. Oh, the more things I get and talk about before these videos will be, well, just add to it because I definitely want to make things a little bit more structured, I guess, on the Zimcast. So I'll be experimenting with a few things here and there. But power scaling, everyone's got their own thoughts about power scaling. I like it. I think it's a fun discussion topic. And some people hate it. Some people adamantly hate it, even though they will still do versus battles, but they won't quote unquote power scale. And even MLG Godzilla 420 in the chat. Power scaling is lame because we all know Tracer solos all affection. Of course, Tracer solos all affection, but Chibi Zogra solos everything. So Chibi Zogra scales above Tracer. I'm sorry. But since it's in the theme, I guess, of power scaling, if anyone has a power scaling question, definitely put it in as a super chat. That'll be the easiest way for me to answer it because that will alert me and I'll be able to look at things that way. Plus, it'll just add to the discussion and I'll give my own rookie power scaling answers to certain things because I've never claimed to be an expert power scaler. I can logic bro my way through some things, but I'm not in the weeds and I'm not one of the premier power scalers on YouTube. I did a few versus stuff back in the day. I teased one, which I never got around to doing. But yeah, there's a lot of people that I think are really good at power scaling or at least can logic very good answers to questions. Godzilla King of the Monsters being one of them. He has a really good video on why power scaling is important. And I'll be basing some of my own logic in responses to this video off of what he himself has said, because I feel that a lot of things he said I have shared similar sentiment about. He's just been the one to put it into a video. But Firewood Media, I guess, we'll talk about them. So I don't have anything against his channel. I think that he puts out good stuff. It's not all the stuff. I don't watch everything that he puts out. I think some of his topical videos are interesting. Some of them aren't. But outside of that, I have no ill will towards him going into this. But I at least think that some of the questions he brings up or responses to power scaling, I feel, are not the most well thought out. What exactly is power scaling for? I originally thought it was a tool used for writing, but I'm not so sure now. So power scaling does not have a like cemented term or definition to it. Most people who pull the term power scaling come from the versus battle wiki, and I'll try to pull that up right here for you guys. So power scaling definition. Pull this. There we go. So can it be seen on screen? Perfect. So power scaling is determining a character's power by comparing them to other characters in their series, but it can also mean outside of it. So of course we all hate AI here, but Power scaling is a method of determining the relative strength and abilities of fictional characters by comparing them to each other. It often involves analyzing feats, statements, and power levels within a fictional universe to establish a hierarchy of power. Essentially, it's a way to understand how strong a character is based on interactions and comparisons with other characters. Usually, in most cases, this refers to not only comparing characters within their own universes, but comparing them to characters outside of their universe. So, the classic Goku versus Superman argument. Power scaling would help us understand the stakes for one thing. As long as you don't contradict what's established or justify any changes to what's been established, being consistent would help. Yes, I believe that in my thoughts, power scaling is important because if a writer is thinking about the hierarchy of power in their universe, they can create feats and establish stakes in a way that makes sense within their universe. Because I don't believe that necessarily the antagonist or the threat that comes after a previous one needs to necessarily be stronger. You can have threats that challenge a hero in a different way, but if you establish the rules properly and you understand why a villain with lesser power is still able to challenge a hero even though they've overcome a stronger adversary, that can still provide an interesting writing scenario because there are ways in which people can overcome just straight up power. A lot of the term hacks abilities or just hacks in general comes a lot in power scaling because hacks are usually abilities or concepts that can bypass traditional straight up displays of power. However, there are certain cases where these hacks would not apply because of the massive amount of power that is already displayed by a character that they'd overcome hacks in certain scenarios. When they pull the math, I'm just like, oh my lord, how are you this lame, you freaking dorks? Well, we're all dorks, we're all nerds here, as Anthony Gramilibili has said to us, we're all nerds, so we shouldn't be judging other nerds. But no, like, I think that the math is interesting because in a visual sense, sometimes people who are describing these feats or displaying them don't realize the actual magnitude of the feats that they are explaining. And as a result, they may make characters stronger or weaker than they realize, which is just a natural consequence of writing fictional scenarios that involve powers, ideas, and concepts that aren't applicable into the real world, because you're not always able to, on the top of your head, come up with all of the real world applications and ramifications of your power systems. But if you're really dedicated, in most cases you can. I guess shameless plug again, within Kaiju Quarantine, when it comes to how I have written my monster, it is a lot smaller than a lot of other kaiju in most universes. And power-wise, its powers work in a very specific way that makes sense specifically to me. And I will not explain all of those to the audience, aka the readers, or even to the characters, because if you can write ambiguity within your story, that then allows the characters to have a sense of uncertainty, which then allows for them to make not the most logical decisions because they are going off of the best information that they themselves would know based on what is observable. Whereas I, as the writer, I have to essentially write illogical decisions while also being the most logical because I know everything, because you're essentially God as the writer of a story. So you do have to essentially, and this may sound contradictory, you may have to essentially manufacture incompetency, but how you manage that and write that incompetency depends on how much information you give your characters and how much information you give to the readers. I also love all the insults here. Gramuglia is not a nerd. He's a little clown boy. And of course, Goku solos. We all know this. Giggly. I don't even know how to say that. Gramugla goulash. Gabagool. Gabagooey. I mean, gabagooey, that's essentially like an Italian thing. So there you go. Gabagooey. Antabellini, gabalaguni. Oompa Lupini. Oompa Loompa. But yeah, so I think that power scaling is a useful tool. And to cite something that Godzilla King the Monster said in his own video on power scaling, it is largely more applicable as a study. And I use the word study loosely, but it is more useful in a discussion of media than something like shipping, for example. Because when it comes to things like shipping, all you're really doing is talking about, at the end of the day, which characters you think romantically pair well with one another, regardless of story or intention. You just essentially just kind of want to see characters fuck. Let's all be honest. That's the main reason why people like shipping, because they probably think to themselves, oh, I like how these characters look together, or I imagine myself as this character and I want to be with this character. Shipping has less value than power scaling, because in most cases, shipping has little to do with the actual story in and of itself, unless the story itself is about relationships in the romantic sense, of course. And Minecraft had something you said above. Most of power scalers' bad rap is because of those who take it way too seriously. And I think that is true. Most people take power scaling way too seriously, because a lot of people's egos and their internet perception is tied to the arguments that they make. I think good power scalers should be able to accept when they are wrong, or at least when new information arises that may challenge their previous understandings of things, because that will just allow you to become a better power scaler as a result. I think that is a sign of someone who is able to understand their media a lot better as well, when you're not too tied to the arguments of who's going to win in a fight, even if you were able to accurately make that assumption and make those cases visibly clear to an audience member. Fun fact, the new Superman, according to James Gunn, despite being the most powerful hero in his universe, is among the weaker Superman out there. Yeah, well, I mean, Superman is so overpowered because of the numerous feats that remain in continuity, that in a case of like writing a new incarnation of a character, a lot of people will get hung up on how powerful that incarnation is, because they essentially have a legacy of power to live up to. Or to make a more meany idea of it, the hierarchy of power in the Zim universe is about to change. But yeah, like, I think that you should never, as a writer, feel pigeonholed by the power of another incarnation and feel like your incarnation or your favorite version of a character is less than important because they are weaker. I think that if they are faithful to the intentions of the character, then that's all you really need to care about. Unless you as a person are dedicated to the idea that your character, your version is the most powerful, then I think that is where then the issue comes into play. I would also say something about power scales entertainment. Like, yeah, it's just fun to watch people like throw different characters around, and even the arguments can be fun as long as people like understand that it is for fun. Just like consuming all media. Let's say I don't care if my fave loses. The people who take it too seriously make me have secondhand embarrassment. Well, don't even worry about having secondhand embarrassment. They're not you. Like, you're enjoying the hobby. That's the same thing with just enjoying any piece of media that has a fandom that does cringe things. If you're not doing cringe, then you don't need to worry about it. If someone else says, oh, you're part of that community, you must post cringe, then be like, no, I don't. If someone says something to the effect of, yeah, you do, you're part of this community, and that's just a bad argument. And I know someone else. Oh, yeah, there it is. A lot of anti-scales I've seen are just mad about one specific matchup where their character loses. So they basically just, if I can't do it, no one can. Yeah, no, exactly. Vinnick, how's it going? How's it going? Glad to see you in here. And Godzilla in -1 has a powerful atomic breath, among the most powerful, but he has a major drawback. He takes physical damage to you, which is why he doesn't spam it. Well, the other thing is that even from a feats perspective, -1 does not have an incredibly powerful atomic breath. In terms of feats, 54 beats -1 in a straight up fight, but in the world that -1 creates, that Godzilla has an extremely overpowered weapon, and the people who take him down have less overtly powerful means to take him down, but it is through the logistics and how they deal with this threat that allows them to win the day. And that's what makes for an interesting scenario for the stakes to have that effect. And was wondering if you show off the Poacher vs. Ogre piece I did. Seems fitting. Yeah, actually, that is pretty fitting. I just need to find it there. And yeah, I do see some people in the comment section bringing up versus scenarios. So again, if you have a versus scenario you want me to sort of comment on, again, I am not an expert power scaler, but definitely put that up as a super chat, because I'll be able to respond to that like way easier. And there we go. Let me share that for you guys. Of course, Vic always showing off things as always. So yeah, Zogra versus Pocho, or Pocho versus Zogra. PVZ, or I was about to say CMP, but no, is if it's mixed around to be ZVP or ZEP or PEVs, whichever one you like. Speaking of, actually, I'll answer this power scaling question right here. Vanilla versus chocolate depends. So if we're scaling properly, at its peak, vanilla soft serve outscales chocolate soft serve. And if we're to say that chocolate, like soft serve in general, outscales regular forms of ice cream, then vanilla solos easily. And we've already hit 20 minutes. So we're gonna start the video here. And of course, again, like I said earlier, I have nothing against Firewood Media. I think he does good work for the most part. I just don't think that the video that he presented here is necessarily the best. And you guys all know me. So we're doing YouTubers on speed as Zim intended. Can't do it any other way. And I'm also using the Chrome tab in this case so I can hop over if need be. My major rule for power scaling is just don't make your lizard powerful enough to kill God if you can't beat up a mere rabbit orangutan. That's true. I understand that. So let us begin, gentlemen.
The internet is a great place for connecting with other fans of things you like. And my YouTube channel is where I usually dive into deep discussions about Godzilla films, mainly the filmmaking of said movies.
Real quick, I just want to make sure. Could everyone hear that? I just want to make sure. What's worse, user trolls band together or Black Critic Guy or both? I have no context for that, so there you go. Also, I don't think I've ever really seen you before. Prehistoric Horat 2003. Hello, welcome. Had you not heard it good? Okay, so that should be good. Let's go.
I often ask my viewers for video suggestions, and for a while, I kept getting bombarded with requests to do power scaling videos, those exhausting who would win debates.
So I just want to read this. You talk too much about characters and themes and all that stuff that no one cares about besides you. Okay. I mean, yeah, it's maybe important a little, but honestly, I think you spend way too much time on it for real. I think I speak for many Godzilla fans when I say we don't care. We don't come here for deep story analysis or metaphors or whatever. And it's a I know Vic stocks have been in the highs right now after the Black Rooney debate. I'm not saying the Black lost, but I'm just saying that, we appreciate Vics around here. We like the Vic mentality, Vic mindsets, but I will always find it funny whenever someone says that many Godzilla fans or us Godzilla fans don't come for deep story analysis or themes, considering what the original Godzilla was always about. Oh no. I think there's more that come out after this, but this feels like a really cherry-picked example, but it doesn't really help Firewood's case if he's saying I hate power scaling, but then like the example he's showing is someone who's a Monsterverse fan and a GXK fan in particular. But let's keep going. These are just dumb, fun monster movies. No need to criticize it so much, dude. We come from monster fights and power scaling and all that good stuff. Please try to focus more on those next time. Like, give more breakdowns of fights, who is stronger, who has better abilities, and that kind of thing. That's what makes it fun for us. Like, replace us with we, and in that case, I mean, like, who's we? We talking French here? Like, that kind of we? Sacre bleu? But, yeah, no. It speaks to, I guess, the diversity of the fan base, that there's some people just come for the fights and there's some that come for the analysis and the themes of these movies, because that's really what has been important to the community. Yeah, no, to use my own words. Who? I need to clip that. I'll have to ask Animus just to give me the clip of me doing that for myself. But Monsterverse fans need to watch action movies and not slop. How would you say in good faith that you are not into storytelling aspects of media while not denigrating it? Let me read that again. How would you say in good faith that you're not into the storytelling aspects of media while not denigrating it? Interesting question. And actually, I'll leave it on screen for anyone who wants to discuss that in the live chat. So I think that in certain cases, in good faith, just meaning like honesty, some people, when they go into a movie, they aren't thinking of like the clear delineation of events, like the here to now. How does that happen? Cause and effect, things of that nature. Some people just go in for good visuals, and if someone is pleased by the visuals they see on screen, then that in good faith is them saying that they appreciate that media because of the visuals it provides. I think that it is not a fully encompassing or importance, or maybe importance not the right word, but at least to a lot of us here, it's not a big sort of no, maybe important is the right word, an important way to analyze or understand the media that you're consuming. But in some cases, there are certain directors who don't care too much about the story they are presenting because what is presented is really the visuals. And I think that in certain cases, like everything, there's always blurring of those lines, but the lines are there for a reason because the exceptions prove the rules. I think that an example of a story or a piece of media that does visuals first and tells the story through those visuals is Primal. And it's a good one to bring up because most people in the circle have seen Primal or have heard of Primal. And it is unique primarily because of the fact that the only human character you see for most of the series doesn't speak at all. And the themes and ideas can be portrayed without verbal communication between one another and the expressing of these ideas. And I think that pieces of media like that, you don't really need to understand the deeper themes at play there. While they are important, if you analyze purely how Gendy is able to shoot and present a fight between a caveman, a T-Rex, and another monster, and understand sort of the basic elements of that story, I think that you can appreciate Primal to that degree, but you will miss out on the deeper aspects of it. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of people, and I don't believe everyone needs to understand media on a deeper level. There are many people who do not have the time nor the patience, or just generally don't want to for one reason or another, to analyze media on that level because it doesn't matter to them. They are looking purely for an escape. I don't think that that is the best way to go about analyzing or consuming media, because indeed it does lower the quality of media, because if that is enough to satisfy the majority of people, how shareholders and people with money tend to be, they will try to go for the lowest common denominator but the most amount of profit. So there is a balancing act that comes into play. As a monster, I'm not like that. Like, I think he meant by them. As a Monsterverse fan, I'm not like them and enjoy the Monsterverse. How about you stop cherry picking? Well, obviously, I'm not the one doing it. I know what you mean. And I think that, like, in cases like this, whenever you're showing screenshots, showing like several, I think, is better, because then you have a better understanding to the consensus, which I think he does in this video, but I could be wrong. One thing I'll say is I hate when I see a piece of media that I trust has a good story, but have what, in my opinion, is an ugly article. Common side effects is one example. I haven't seen common side. I don't know common side effects, but I think by ugly article, what do you mean by that? Black Greenie has its thoughts. Has it really? Someone send me $1 every time I get vindicated. Call the Rooney is right. The Rooney Foundation.
About which kaiju is stronger than another. Some people even wanted me to add power scaling sections to my Godzilla retrospective videos.
I just want to go back to what he just said.
Stronger than another. Some people even want.
He says some, but it's just this one person. I assume probably if I went through all of his videos, we could find more examples. But this definitely feels like the most indicative of that fan mentality. And I wish that there were more examples to choose from, which, that again, I think that would reinforce the point better, because this feels like such an obvious example of everything that I know on my channel and on other people's channels we've railed against, that to us feels kind of meaningless, if that makes sense.
Wanted me to add power scaling sections to my Godzilla retrospective videos, but I've always shut that down, usually with troll replies like, I don't want to do who would win videos, because that's the kind of things that kids argue about at recess. For me,
when it comes to troll responses as well, and I just stopped right here, we're only 41 seconds into this video. Like, I understand the urge to do troll responses. I have done them myself. I think that if you have such an aversion to something like power scaling that you make a whole video about it, doing troll responses, I feel it just fuels the fire, because there's going to be more people who are then going to ask you more and try to be more persuasive in their argumentation, which is going to fuel the fire. I think that if you don't want to do something on your channel, just say, I'm not doing it. Simple as, like, be very succinct with people. And I think maybe it's just how I feel when it comes to internet etiquette. If there's someone who asks me to do something on my channel or do something art related, and I just know I don't have the time for it, or it's not something I'm going to do or feel strongly about, I'm just going to be straight up with it and just say, no, not my thing, or nope, not going to do it, or I can do this, but not the other thing you've requested. Because I know that, like, how people can be, things are always going to roll downhill.
Power scaling sucks the fun out of appreciating these movies.
So he says power scaling sucks out the fun of appreciating these movies. And now my question will then be, why?
What starts as a harmless thought experiment quickly turns into a vortex of pointless arguments that drain all the joy from fandom and warp how people engage with art.
How? I understand that, like, he'll elaborate on these points more, but in honestly, to be not pedantic, but to really think about it, outside of enjoyment, continual discussion about a piece of media after you have purchased and consumed it is in and of itself pointless. We attribute value to it because we like it, and outside of personal enjoyment or shared enjoyment, there really isn't any other tangible value that comes from appreciating or analyzing media deeper. We like it because we love we're for the love of the game and all that. But to say that power scaling has just pointless arguments immediately opens up the response that analyzing media on a deeper level to an audience just leads to more pointless either appreciation or dislike, because you as the YouTuber are going to shepherd your audience one way or another based on whether they're attracted to your arguments because they agree with you or disagree with you. So I would say that, like, that argument is poor.
I've seen firsthand how easily it derails conversations. When I think about why I love Godzilla, it's not because I'm sitting there crunching numbers on how many megashits per teraflops his atomic breath could destroy. It's because
I think also that's a troll response, but also a poor argument as well, because most people in general who are like power scaling or doing who would wins aren't usually thinking about it too deeply. They're just thinking about what they visually see on screen and the feats displayed, because in most cases, people who aren't deep into power scaling are usually presenting power scaling in a sense of, on screen in this scene here, Godzilla did this. From my understanding of this idea, this is how strong Godzilla should be. So in this context here, he would beat this other monster. Not, oh, by pixel scaling this. It's very rarely do you actually find too many people analyzing it to that extent, which is why there is very few power scaling channels, and why the ones that are at least well respected or well liked are gaining the followers that they do. It's a vicious cycle. Power scales make people that focus on themes and characters right to say that power scaling doesn't matter, and then power scales start caring less about writing. I don't think power scales care less about writing. I think that people who call themselves power scalers, or as you even clarify here, those specific power scalers, don't care about writing. I think even most people who say they care about power scaling don't really care about power scaling. What they really care about is just seeing what fights they saw on screen. They don't care about statements or feats, and they just think that their monster wins because of what they saw on the TV or the movie screen.
These films are weird, messy, and full of raw creativity. Movies about smashing models together, reflecting cultural fears, and bringing bizarre creatures to life.
That also kind of denigrates the medium itself by saying, oh, it's just like smashing models together. And like, that's kind of the same thing as saying, oh, power scaling is just pointless arguing.
Power scaling strips all of that away. It turns something expressive and mythic into a spreadsheet of stats and meaningless calculations. And that,
again, disagree, because if you strip away the mythic quality that he describes to these stories, to many people, you are stripping away the layer that that wall that separates the idea that this could actually happen or the believability of the medium into something that is mechanical, like suit construction, acting, casting, like music creation, things like that. So analyzing anything too deeply will ultimately strip away the verisimilitude of the medium of its in and of itself. It's just some part of it that you don't like and you probably don't understand all that well. If that's the case, we need a new name for them, not power scales, like what we would call kids that like to fight over whose dad can beat up the other. Like, Same thing as like video, like people don't generally like the idea of video essayists because of the reputations that they have come up with. I don't then believe that we should stop using the term video essayist, because there is value in using the term, same as there's value in using the idea of power scaling. I think that if you are someone who is responsible with your rhetoric and with the ideas that you're presenting, you can, from a case by case basis, understand when someone is using, and I'm using quotes or quote unquote power scaling incorrectly, versus someone who is actually trying to power scale because they want to see which characters can win in a fight, but also what these stats and what the implications of these abilities have on the story or the continuity of a world.
That's why I hate it, because it reduces something soulful, like art, to something sterile, like endless debates and discussions that feel more at home with sports. End of video.
Sports? Well, in a way, sports can also be an art in and of itself, because not every player is going to have the same style to them. I think that even though I'm myself not a sports fan, talking with people who are sports fans, they will describe the stats, their percentage, stuff like that to a player, but explain how, with like their team comp or even them as an individual person in an individual sport, perform their game in a certain way to achieve their desired outcome. And the same goes for MLG, like competitive gaming, things like that. Teams will create certain styles to themselves, personalities. There is something soulful to stats, and all that stats and things like that do is give you greater context for what you are watching. That is just as soulful as the idea of what Firewood Media is describing. If anything, it is reducing it to a dichotomy of how I appreciate and how I examine this art is meaningful on a deeper level, on a deeper metaphysical level, versus what you're doing, which is more mechanical. Oh my god, first half of my use. Yeah, MLG. Thanoscalers, something along those lines. Argumentors.
Video. You can click off now. Leave your hate comment. Bye. God damn it. This video is going to get me.
Well, yeah, I just want to go back here again. Another problem I have with this video.
End of video. You can click off now. Leave your hate comment. Bye. God damn it.
I want to, one sec, because there we go. I don't think it pulled. Yeah, I didn't pull over to the other tab, so I'm just going to stop sharing there because I want to pull up something that he did in a community post regarding the topic. So, share. There it is. So this is response to KOTM's post, and we'll just look at here. Where he says, yes, I saw that loser Firewood made a 20-minute tantrum on power scaling bad. Stop bringing it up. I don't care about the incoherency of someone only popular for talking about toys. Just don't watch trash like that. Starve attention-seeking morons. And he says, I saw this post going around and figured I'd say something. I'm not here to trade insults or start drama, even though, let's be honest, in the video, you just say, like, you essentially make the distinction that how you talk about media, soulful, good. Power scaling, anyone who talks about it, soulless, and later on in the video says anti-art, and it says, oh, there you go, leave your hate comment, bye. So essentially you are encouraging it, even if you're saying it's just a joke. Again, if we're talking about, if we want to get into the discussion of like creator responsibility, things of that nature, then even making a troll response like that encourages responses. Someone didn't like my video on power scaling, so instead on engaging with the actual argument, they decided to call me a loser and a moron, which bizarrely claiming I'm just some toy reviewer, which is news to me considering I really don't make videos about toys, which again, calling power scaling vapid, pointless, and then telling people to just click off and post a hate comment. So even if we claim it's a joke, they're doing exactly what you said in the video to do. This is that kind of hostility that gives the power scaling community a bad name. If the response to someone questioning that mindset is immediate mockery and incoherence, it kind of proves the point, doesn't it? The video wasn't made to pick a fight. It was about how fan discourse becomes hollow when it stops being about the art, which, what does he mean by art? Which we'll get into because he doesn't really define the term, and it turns it into stat math and ego. If that felt threatening, maybe take a big step back and ask yourself why. That being said, people like this are a vocal minority. The reception to my video has been largely positive, and I want to give a big thanks to everyone who's engaged with it, blah, in good faith, blah, blah, blah. So I don't really take I find so many issues with the response to it, as well as, again, we're only a minute 42 in, and just the presentation doesn't engender the good faith discussion that I feel is warranted. And it's not even like, for example, on a live stream where if someone has an issue, they'd be like, hey, can I come on your live stream and discuss these things? I'm all cool with that. Whereas with this is essentially someone telling something to another person. It is not a dialogue in the traditional sense.
This video is going to get me into so much shit. Let's do it.
And again, you proved yourself right there.
I've also seen these debates spiral into absolute chaos. What starts as casual fun quickly mutates into weirdly intense battles, with people treating fictional monster stats like they're debating real-world sports teams. Like, you'd swear...
And the same can also be said for the analyzing media, and whether it's not soul or heart, or whether it's well constructed. I mean, the King of the Monsters debates are proof of that, to be honest. So, or even the upcoming Shin Godzilla debate, since Shin's on screen right here. I really don't think that is like exclusive to the idea of power scaling. I mean, to be frank, I've never really liked power scaling because it didn't interest me. It was more interested into the monster designs and themes. Yeah. And again, everyone is entitled to like a specific aspect of the art that they consume. It does not then mean that's like overtly or objectively that the piece that they value has no merit or value at all. It has value to you because you enjoy it. That is essentially the base foundation to anything that you want to consume. But yeah, movies aren't about logic and plot. They're about the emotion and feeling. John Top Fills. I think that, yeah. Well, I think that movies have logic and plot, and the logic and plot, when they are good, provides the emotion and the feeling. And I want to see Blue Nova in the Shin debate. I doubt Blue Nova would come on the channel, but if Blue ever reached out and was like, hey, if you're doing a Shin Godzilla debate, let me know and I could set that up with you, I'd totally be down to let him on.
That r/power scaling was just the online version of ESPN's First Take with Stephen A. Smith.
Also, real quick.
Teams. Like, you'd swear that r/power scaling was just the online version of ESPN's First Take with Stephen.
Yeah, so there you go. r/power scaling. My guy, my dude, my brother, you're looking at r/anything, it's Reddit. Like, I don't even use like the r/Godzilla subreddit or any r/kaiju stuff in general, because I just don't like going on Reddit because of the general reputation of the website and how you foster communities on those websites. It just does not foster good communication because of being Reddit and the reputation that Reddit has. Same could be said for anything like Twitter or things like that, but looking at specifically r/power scaling is just as meaningless as looking at r/any community on Reddit and seeing all the toxic discourse that appears there, or even for Twitter too.
Stephen A. Smith.
His very first move as the executive was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack.
And it's Zimcast was by Ariat. But again, the same could go for like sports discussions as well. Like, those are so full. Like, people wouldn't be invested in sports if there wasn't some kind of art around it.
Because it's not really about who's stronger anymore. It's about proving who understands the lore better, who can analyze feats more accurately, and who can flex their knowledge the hardest. It is.
Again, that is assuming the intentions of the people who are power scaling, which not everyone is trying to flex their knowledge. I think some people genuinely are like that. And then there's other people who do like these scenarios and just want to logic around them and see who would win based on the available information. And I think that is essentially cherry picking the worst possible examples for people and then saying that applies to the whole, which again is interesting because looking at his post, he says that most of the people who responded to the video did so in good faith or were positive about it. But then you start painting with a broad brush here. I love Maverick. I want to see his analysis of Daredevil Stillborn. r/Zim. If there ever was an r/anything for me, I'd be very sad. Bad writing masquerades as thought-provoking social / political commentary. Oh, that's about Shin. Yeah, no, there's a lot of people who want to do the Shin debate. Shin 007, 0 feet, 0 accurate fan of depiction, 7 hit cannons carrying its power level. That's true. You can't outrun me.
is exhausting. And personally, I'd rather use my time and brain power discussing filmmaking techniques, themes, and the weirder artistic elements of the genre. Things that are tangible. But let's take a big...
Well, he says things that are tangible. If power scaling is more mechanical and breaks things down to a stat block or math, that would make them more objective, more like concrete, and therefore actually more tangible than the artistic merit in terms of like how this shot impacted me on an emotional, sociopolitical, economical level. Like, I don't know. That's a weird use of the term tangible.
Big step back. What even is power scaling? I assume most of you watching this know, but for the few who don't, let's break it down. Power scaling is the practice of comparing the capabilities of fictional characters to determine the outcome of a hypothetical fight. This usually involves analyzing attack power, durability, speed, intelligence, special abilities, or hacks, and equipment. Power scalers break down feats, which are the on-screen demonstrations of power, and statements, which are in-universe claims or lore material to build a hierarchy of evidence. Supposedly, narrative context is the most reliable factor, followed by feats, then statements, and finally outside materials like data books or interviews. The idea is to quantify fictional strength, creating a ranking system that allows for cross-series comparisons. But here's the thing. Once you start applying that level of analysis, these stories stop being stories. They become equations.
No, they're still stories. Just because you know that John Nightrain can beat up John Elden Ring in fight B67-89, that does not degrade the quality of Elden Ring's story. Again, those things aren't like applicable to one another. Just because Godzilla 54 can beat up Godzilla -1 in a fight does not diminish the like narrative impact or writing of Godzilla 54 or Godzilla -1.
There's something deeply off-putting and anti-art to me about trying to quantify the strength of a monster that's meant to be symbolic or mythic.
Even by the same logic, a lot of the monsters that we see in like the Champion Festival films didn't have that same mythic quality. Same goes for like a lot of the Ultraman monsters. That if someone who is creating a story about a monster isn't presenting it with the quote unquote mythic qualities to it, it was just like, oh, this monster's cool, let's see him fight Ultraman in this wacky scenario, then it doesn't have the mythic quality to therefore be anti-art. Because I want to go through that clip one more time.
Deeply off-putting and anti-art to me about trying to quantify the strength of a monster that's meant to be symbolic or mythic.
And another issue I have here is that he doesn't like explain or qualify what he means by the term anti-art. Like, what exactly did he misinterpret in the movie? I'm curious. I assume it's still about the Shin stuff. Glub shitted on can beat Ultraman. There's a lot of like technically Glub Shido monsters throughout the Ultraman series that have beaten Ultraman. And the reason why I'd call them Glub Shido monsters is because they like never appear again in another Ultraman series. It's usually really only Showa monsters that appear again, some Heiseis, but very rarely.
Godzilla is not a set of stats. He's a metaphor for nuclear devastation, or a metaphor for guilt, or whatever the fuck Godzilla versus Megalon was.
Well, if you don't know what Godzilla versus Megalon is, then how could you then say that there is a mythic quality to Godzilla versus Megalon if you don't know what it is? And if people are able to be like, well, based on this point in the timeline, Godzilla has gotten stronger, fought more enemies. This is how strong Megalon is in comparison to his other enemies. There is far less harm in that than just saying that, essentially dismissing Godzilla versus Megalon outright. If the point and the standpoint that you are coming from is that of these monsters and these ideas in these movies present mythic qualities to them or have these deep significant themes.
You reduce him to just numbers and feats. You flatten him into something dull and mechanical. There's nothing interesting about him then. And sure, some people do find that...
I mean, again, how... I keep having to stop, but like... if you're able to break down these feats and show how a character is able to overcome these events and these scenarios based on their power and how they're able to get through and use their power in a unique, special way, they aren't just static and mechanical or stale. There is genuine thought to how you put a character in a scenario with the abilities that they have and then see how characters work around that. That is what makes fights interesting, even with low stakes. Like a big problem a lot of people have in stories is the idea of power creep, where one villain is defeated and then another villain comes which is just as powerful. Dragon Ball Z is the biggest example of that, where after each fight Goku gets stronger, the villain gets stronger, and then you keep going to these impossible levels of power that the stakes stop feeling meaningful because we've gotten to a level of abstraction and ability that any actual understanding of like what really is going on doesn't mean anything. That is an example of where power scaling can indeed affect the story in the sense of, because you understand how wildly strong these characters are, you feel that there's nothing that's going to happen because you know they're not going to punch away the universe, because that can't happen because the story's not going to continue. So there could be interesting aspects into that and to see how they're restricted in their abilities or how they work around it. But in a lot of cases, bad power scaling or bad understanding of power overall will and can and has affected stories. I remember Matt kept from Monster speculating who'd win in Death Battles Godzilla vs. Gamera. No, Matt didn't really, like, he didn't completely predict it or like speculate. He just, it was essentially like, oh, I want Gamera to win because of this or that reason, and less like, I think Gamera would win because of these feats in that scenario, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I hate when people use the slide kick gif, like old movies don't justify modern mediocrity. No, again, God's like, it is super funny when every time someone wants to bring up something wacky or bad or out of place in the Godzilla franchise, it is always Megalon slide dropkick. I'm thinking after either Zimcast 100 or Zimcast 101, we will be doing a video talking about Godzilla versus Megalon. I think I want to have everyone who's getting me for that stream and know that they're going to go for it, because I want everyone to go through the historical context and really explain like why they think that this movie just keeps getting talked about, because everyone, whether you're a fan, a tourist, a grifter, an Anthony Gramuglia, you will bring up Godzilla versus Megalon at one point in your Godzilla video, 1, 2, 3, maybe. Like, it seems ubiquitous that anytime there's something to bring down Godzilla with, it's Megalon. Or 98, but 98's justified at least. Showing Godzilla's breath and how he destroys the ships helps build tension in later battles, adding to the stakes, I would say. Yeah, no, exactly. And 0 days since YouTuber commentator shows the versus Megalon dropkick. Yep. Nope, literally. Same 3 clips. Dance, slide, flight. No, I think these people watch them, but like, it seems so easy. Dr. Sarazawa, I'm afraid to inform you that your creation, Zilla Melcha 3000 Megalodon Ultra Kill, was used in an unexpected manner.
That kind of analysis fun, and I guess if you think that, wonderful. But to me, it strips away the ambiguity and mystery that make these films compelling in the first place. When I watch Shin Godzilla, I don't need to know the exact energy output of his atomic breath. I just need to feel the horror of it. When I watch Final Wars,
no one said that you need to understand that. It is just there are people who actually do know based on what they can see, and that's good for them.
I don't need to compare power levels to enjoy how over the top and insane it is. Not everything in fiction of it. When I watch Final Wars, I don't need to compare power levels.
That's also not Final Wars. I think that's probably a mistake. But even then, like, people love to compare Heisei Godzilla to Godzilla Final Wars. You do not need to know whether Heisei Godzilla could beat Final Wars Godzilla in a fight to appreciate Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Same goes for the fact that, like, you don't necessarily need to know whether Space Godzilla solos the Showa universe to appreciate Godzilla versus Space Godzilla.
To enjoy how over the top and insane it is. Not everything in fiction needs to be quantified.
Not everything needs to be, but it doesn't mean everything shouldn't be or things don't need. Like, by saying that not everything needs to be, it opens it up to the inverse, where it doesn't mean everything has to be a mystery and like no one knows. Like, just because we know that stop motion was something used back in the day does not mean we need to know the exact frames or the techniques used to create it. We can just appreciate the stop motion for what it is. But people would say that that's not a good argument, because understanding how a like character was brought to life will make you appreciate it more. And I think that inversely, if someone is power scaling, understanding where a character sits within a hierarchy of power in an established universe will make them appreciate whether or not writers accounted for that level of power. I think that there is just as much value in analyzing that as there is in analyzing anything external to a piece of media. In all fairness, he might be trying to make an argument for missing the forest for the trees. I think that is the point. However, in doing so, he also misses the forest for the trees because he doesn't allow for the inverse to also be allowed to shine, at least like entertaining the possibility that the inverse is also true. Because I think that just as there are power scalers who don't really care about the themes or the writing or anything of the sort and just want to see monsters fight and win, as he presents at the start of his video, inversely, there are people who talk about the emotions and the feelings they have for movies. And then when you say how these events leading up to each other don't make sense because of A, B, and C occurring, they get upset because it ruins the mystery, the mystique, and the quote unquote fun that comes from art. So I think that in this case, the arguments just aren't the best. Or if you're going to present a wide-ranging argument like this, at least entertain the inverse.
Sometimes the fun is in the uncertainty, the spectacle, and the personal interpretation of it. After all, isn't that what movies are for?
No.
Sometimes the fun is in the uncertainty, the spectacle, and the personal interpretation of it. After all, isn't that what movies...
The question, what are movies for? Essentially, you can break this down into not being just what isn't that what movies are for. It almost, you could break it down into isn't that what movies ought to be for in this case? Because ultimately, a movie is just a commercial piece of media that is visuals on a screen presenting you with a linear series of events, in most cases, in terms of linear. What you take away from that movie is going to determine and be determined completely by what you take away from it yourself. It is up to you to analyze the story, to analyze the writing, the orchestral decisions, like where the music is, the acting choices, the casting. Everything about a movie is a series of choices that lead to a finished product. And as the viewer and as the consumer, you have the opportunity to question and consider every single one of those decisions. I think in a lot of cases, most people will consider doing all of that pedantic, but if that is ultimately what you see movies as a commercial product that you can then analyze, then it doesn't really matter. This reads like that there is a right way to play Dark Souls. Yeah, or like maybe you're just watching movies wrong, to quote a certain person that we are very familiar with on this channel and others. What are movies but mystery boxes? Jar Jar Abrams. That is correct. Isn't power scaling also personal interpretation? To a degree, yes. I think in the case of power scaling, there are certain cases where if you compare one like thing to another, even if you're saying, well, it's my personal interpretation that Master Chief from Halo CE beats Raditz in a fight. If that is your personal interpretation and someone asks you why, and you can't really explain why, and you just say Master Chief is my favorite character, that is your personal interpretation, but there's very little value in that. If someone says, well, Raditz can beat Master Chief in a fight, I like Master Chief more than Raditz, but Raditz is shown to be able to be stronger than a character who can blow up the moon, more than likely Raditz is going to beat Master Chief in a straight up fight. That is personal interpretation as well, but based on all the information that's presented for both characters, given the scenario that both have agreed to and presented, there is oftentimes a right answer to a question like that. To quote Black Arena, Kong is Moses. What's interesting is that someone else, I forget who it was, also mentioned that Kong is essentially a Moses figure. Wait, no, it wasn't just another person. It literally was. I'm thinking of Black's recent video. Go check that out. That's a really good video. I was like wondering who was it I just watched that said Kong is kind of like Moses.
Movies are for. I can make a whole different video about like ending explained videos and how I hate those too. But power scaling to me is very reminiscent of that. Again,
in this case, again, have to qualify. What do you mean by an ending explained? Like, there are certain cases to like know how a like story ends. Like we know for a fact in Godzilla 1954, Godzilla dies at the end of a movie.
Anti-art. Now I've seen a lot of push.
And again, he says it again.
Hate those two, but power scaling to me is very reminiscent of that. Again, it's anti-art.
Define anti-art then. Like we're on a counter of two, guys, for anti-art, but is never defined as what anti-art means.
Now, I've seen a lot of pushback towards my stance on this issue, which at this point, I'm completely used to. I've seen a ton of arguments against what I've said in the past, so I hope this video acts as both a response to that and as a litmus test to see who actually watched this video and who just saw the title and thumbnail, got mad, and immediately started writing out a yap fest in the comments about why I'm wrong, I'm fat, and I'm gay. I don't know.
Well, that's why we do streams, guys.
Oh, I've seen some people argue that power scaling helps maintain consistency in storytelling and prevents illogical power creep. But let's be real. Most of the time, that's not what's happening. The vast majority
Well, you have to, okay, so where are you going to prove that?
of discourse that I've seen firsthand is just not that. And
So the amount of discourse that you have seen firsthand, which would then be anecdotal and therefore is not a like really accurate presentation of the whole. Like, is anecdotal information valuable in certain cases? Yes. But in the case of saying that for the most of the stuff I've seen, it proves that what I am saying is correct. No, it's just showing that you've seen a lot of this. And someone could easily, and I will use this as an example, I've seen a lot of people who are power scalers who have logical like debates with one another, and any kind of like back and forth is riffing because they're all friends, or there's no riffing at all and people are just questioning things back and forth and it doesn't get as heated as that. So an anecdotal claim is often able to be responded with a anecdotal claim right back at it.
instead, it's people arguing over which character is stronger, and that's it.
That's all. But if they're arguing which character is stronger, that's not like there's nothing bad about that unless it gets toxic.
Mindset tends to be most prevalent in action-driven series, especially in anime, where power progression is a key theme. Look no further than series like One Punch Man or Dragon Ball Z, where there's been a constant debate as to whether Anime Man A or Anime Man B is stronger than the other. Another common defense is that
And this also ignores internal power scaling with other characters within their universe, but okay.
power scaling can actually enhance appreciation for characters by showing how they overcome stronger opponents. But here's the issue I have with that. Appreciation doesn't have to come from knowing the exact strength of an attack or how many tons a monster can lift. The appeal of
But again, that is almost gatekeeping the idea of what should or shouldn't be appreciated. If they have a further appreciation because now they're able to understand on a deeper level how story beat A is able to be accomplished because of these internal mechanisms, and a creative is thinking about that, then yeah, that is a legitimate and good reason to appreciate that piece of art more. Absolute Batman eats main universe Bane. I got the newest issue of Absolute Batman, and seeing Absolute Bane is crazy. I love Bane as a character, so I'm very interested to see what they do with that story. Bias Logic Death Battle, which is full of a showcase of talented creators both behind the scenes and in the community, are artists because they power scale. Well, that's the thing, is that even Death Battle doesn't always power scale the best, but even if the scenarios they present aren't always right given factors that other people point out, they still present art and they do something that is interesting and entertaining. And if we were to say that, like, we then have to say like, oh, well, what is art if not to entertain in that case? And unless we say art is this like mystical, undefinable, floopy doopy glup shitto type of thing, then at that point you've defeated your own argument. Yeah, Death Battle is a form of entertainment and it is artful.
Godzilla or any kaiju isn't about raw power rankings. It's about their presence, their themes, and cinematic impact. I can love Gamera's.
But that's another thing too, is that, well, just rewind that.
Any kaiju isn't about raw power rankings. It's about their presence, their themes, and cinematic impact.
So if Space Godzilla, since he's on screen, didn't show feats that were more impressive than the last villain, then his screen presence would be diminished. So power and power scaling to a degree go hand in hand with a character's presentation and how they appear on screen.
I can love Gamera's scrappiness without needing a numerical breakdown of how he defeated Legion.
You don't need to know that. But again, people can appreciate a story and how he overcame that more and how he used his abilities if they do.
I can appreciate Showa Godzilla's strength without having to compare his durability to Heisei Godzilla's.
Again, okay. That doesn't mean that other people don't think this as well. There's a lot of people who like Showa Godzilla. I know Antonio earlier in the stream asked what my thoughts on Goji Chronic. I like Goji Chronic. I think he's cool. And I think Showa Godzilla is his favorite. KOTM's favorite is, I think, Heisei Godzilla. But Heisei beats Showa Godzilla that doesn't mean I don't appreciate Showa Godzilla.
Power scaling doesn't necessarily add to these elements. It just redirects the conversation away from them.
Again, you haven't proven or qualified that at all.
Then there are the more extreme technical methods like pixel scaling, where people measure attack size based on visuals and real-world physics calculations applied to fictional scenarios. These methods are laughably unreliable because fiction doesn't work like reality.
Okay. And again, there's also many cases where attacks that are stated to be like these crazy things don't do what they're stated to be, and it can make these mythic stories and these mythic characters feel underwhelming as a result. So yeah, there are cases where even ignoring the technical aspect of pixel scaling, just looking at certain impact frames or aftermaths of scenarios will make certain feats seem underwhelming as a result, and people will just, and that's just not even a technical understanding of like art or anything like that. There's just visual. Like there's many people who think that like certain displays of power in the Godzilla series aren't really interesting, or like they don't provide interesting battles because you don't see as much destruction as there is in other franchises as a result. And if you're saying like, well, what matters is like their presence, yes, then visual showings do have a idea and do present a sense of scale and presence to a character. Fiction doesn't work like reality, so power scaling a Nolan film is impossible. Power scaling Oppenheimer, bro. I solo Oppenheimer. Bro's a commie, so I win by default. Bane breaking Batman's back should have paralyzed him. Me, I'm a Showa fan. Peak. Would that mean Space Godzilla is more of a threat than Destroy was? Destroy didn't make crystals grow everything. In that case. So actually that's interesting as well. So that's when you have to understand the context of a scenario, because we know that visually, even ignoring like the technicals of power scaling, every time Godzilla has fought another monster to overpower them, he's either used a red spiral beam or a spiral beam. Spiral beam in the case of King Ghidorah, or a red spiral beam in the case of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, or Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Now you see Godzilla in a state where, although he's dying, his base beam color is a red spiral, and the monster that Godzilla is fighting against is created using the device that killed the first Godzilla. Ergo, is logical, even if you don't know the ins and outs of it, to understand that Destroy is a greater threat to Godzilla than Space Godzilla was. Wouldn't that show how much of a threat villains if they show how strong you really is? Yeah, no, exactly. Or wait, I know, Sean. Batman is a film about bat wizards intended for clown boys. Well, you see, Batman, it's all about the clown boys. I'm just a little clown boy analyzing media. I want to know what to do with it. I looked at it objectively. Well, no, you're right, Vinik. Magma does solo, and I will never take that away from you.
Artistic liberties exist. Filmmaking techniques exist. Trying to apply hard math to a movie where a guy in a rubber suit kicks over a building is just missing the point.
Doesn't calling it a man in a rubber suit kicking over a building, or in this case, kicking over miniatures, diminish the artistic merit of the media you were trying to defend from power scaling?
And that is the core issue. Power scaling pretends to be objective, but it's built on subjective interpretation. At the end of the day, in fiction, the writer decides who wins. No matter how much math you throw at it, a creator can just say, yeah, but this character wins.
Yeah, that's just bad writing. Like, if you're saying, oh, well, writing and story all matters down to what the creative wants, then you are now admitting that the creator is God in this case, but that would also then mean that, yes, based on like the ideas and the theories, concepts we have around storytelling, presentation, things of that nature, that the creator can and has made mistakes in the past, and that can lead to poor stories. There are many cases in which a creative, in their creative interpretation and in their story, can make a decision that does not make sense based on the logic they have presented or they have been working with, because they are within a fixed universe that they are a part of that is just bad. A giant monster kicking a building is impossible because giant monsters don't exist. Ergo, power scaling is possible. Man in suit, guys. Cardboard buildings, guys. Yeah, this reminds me of when the creator of Invincible saying he can beat Superman. Yeah, like just because a creator of Invincible says, "Oh yeah, he beats Superman," and you have a picture of Invincible beating Superman, what does that mean anything to me? Because you, as the creator of one of these characters, have now said that a character you have no say over loses. No, that's essentially that is just an appeal to authority, which is also a logical fallacy itself.
As long as it suits the story, that's fine by me. So,
well, then, yeah, if you say as long as it suits the story, but then you have to then justify it within the example. So we can go by a case basis where a creative has said, well, I just want this character to win. There's no logic behind why I want this character to win. I just want them to win, which is probably very few and far between. And I know he's going to bring them up. And again, another appeal to authority, which he'll present here.
All this analysis ultimately means nothing. The reliance on feats and statements disguises the fact that none of this is set in stone. And that leads to endless, pointless debates that
Wouldn't that also be the same? Again, this logic would also apply to any analysis of arts or interpretations or discussions of art.
Personally sick of seeing. And now we get to talk about the T word, toxicity. Toxicity is a huge part of power scaling. Like,
I'd say toxicity is like a big part of any discussion of anything because there's always going to be egos involved. It is not unique to power scaling.
To admit that, even if you are a hardcore power scaler defender, that is just a part of it. And it comes from people just taking it way too seriously. Fanboyism runs rampant with people developing.
These guys have, he's never been these. What? Stan Lee's not a power scaler. These guys have never been power scalers ever.
Rational attachments to their favorite characters and refusing to accept anything that suggests that their favorite character isn't the strongest to ever exist. This leads to biased interpretations, outright misinformation, and endless character wanking, which is
that would just mean that you power scaled bad. Yes, Stan Lee was wrong about that one power scaling quote. It is very true. I think that Stan Lee did a lot of cool things, but that does not mean that his one quote is like gospel. Would showing Godzilla destroy a building inherently act as a depiction of power scaling, showing how destructive he is in escalation? Yes. And same would go for him defeating more powerful weapons of humanity, more powerful monsters.
inflating a character's abilities beyond reason, and the internet only makes it worse. Anonymity and the lack of real consequences encourage aggressive, combative behavior. Gatekeeping.
Okay, so I want to rewind that again one more time.
Internet only makes it worse. Anonymity and the lack of real consequences.
So anonymity and like real consequences. In this case, as if you were god of the internet, you were dictator for life of the internet, what consequences would you implement for people displaying toxicity? Are you going to like bar them from use of the internet? Like there is again, in most cases, on most platforms, if someone is being toxic to you, there's very simple things that you can do. You can block them. And if they continue to respond to you from beyond blocks, report them. It is not hard to use the block button. You can just troll them, as he has done in his video, or you can respond to them. What quote unquote real consequences are there that could be implemented from people being toxic about power scaling? Because I just find this idea, this train of thought, to always be inherently silly. It's silly.
Encourage aggressive, combative behavior. Gatekeeping becomes a problem, with certain fans trying to dictate who counts as a real fan based on whether they adhere.
Gatekeeping happens regardless, not just because of power scaling. So don't pin that on power scaling.
To specific power scaling interpretations. I have been called a fake Godzilla fan because I don't care about power scaling. That's real. I know.
I think, if I recall correctly, wasn't he? I thought he also in another video, or in a comment of another video, had mentioned that someone said he was a fake fan because he didn't like Godzilla versus the Sea Monster or something like that. Like, people are going to call you a fake fan regardless.
I know it. I don't get it. What could be harmless, fun discussions often devolve into personal attacks, insults, and exhausting toxicity.
Again, have to qualify that, because you could say like they often do. Some cases they don't. It depends on who you surround yourself with.
And maybe that's why I find it so frustrating, because when I look at these arguments, it's like watching people fight over the dumbest shit. It's not about appreciating great scenes or talking about why you love these.
Well, again, how are they great scenes if that's up to your interpretation of whether or not they are great scenes? If power scaling is just as subjective and just as meaningless, so too are great scenes. The only difference being the criteria in which you find value in is something that you, again, are promoting as something to appreciate.
Movies, something that could unite everyone. I mean, everyone loves a good movie, especially one.
No, not everyone likes good movie. There's a lot of people who don't like good movies. So that is also that's not true at all.
One that, they're in the fandom for, but instead these arguments are more about proving someone else wrong. And I get that fandom can be competitive, but when it turns into nitpicking over who can lift a bigger rock, it's like, what are you doing? Like, go outside,
Again, just these arguments feel like they could be, almost everything here could be like, well, the same could be said for people who talk way too much about movies and whether or not they're good or bad or not, or just whether something is good. Just go outside. It immediately, criticizing one aspect of a fandom immediately engenders like discussion to be had about the inverse. Like, even when I said earlier on in the stream, I don't find too much value in shipping because this or that reason. If someone who really loves shipping wanted to come on and explain to me this or that reason as to why shipping in any context has artistic merit and value, I will have that conversation. Probably not on the stream because it's not going to relate to Godzilla or in general on my channel. But if they want to have the discussion with me, I am more than willing to have that. It all comes down to, as he says in his post, good faith.
This is the point of why we love these stories in the first place. And I'm not saying you're consuming art the wrong way, but to me, this ultimately seems like immature arguments that you would hear from school children on a playground. And not
that is in essentially saying you're consuming the art the wrong way, but in more words.
Adults demanding to be taken seriously. Some might argue if you don't like power scaling, just ignore it. But the problem is that it does affect the broader fandom to the point where you outright can't ignore it. I wish I could ignore it. I really do. But power scaling unfortunately shapes the way people talk about kaiju, how they engage with movies.
Most people don't. There's a lot of people who do not talk about it. I can say that there are many cases where I see the discussions around power scaling pop up on my Twitter. They come up for a couple weeks, maybe a few days, and then they're gone, and it's back to everything else that is on my feed. There's nothing else going on. Simple as it is like a one and done type of scenario. I like the argument that is not true. And maybe because of the fact that he's such a bigger channel than me, 30.7K versus mine, then maybe because he's a larger channel, the volume of discussions or requests to do power scaling is more common on his channel, which in that case, it just means you have more comments to just not respond to, say you don't do, people are being toxic, more people to block. Is that more work to do? Yes. But if you're cultivating an audience or want to create a certain atmosphere in your community, then that is something I feel you ultimately have to do.
And even what kind of discussions get prioritized. Just go to r/Godzilla. Like, you're going to find weird fake posts about me being dead. I don't know why there was a death hoax. That was bizarre. But you would also find tons of power scaling discussions, which it's like, I wish there was a separate subreddit for that. Like, I wish I could just...
Well, there isn't a separate r/ power scaling discussion. So actually, I'll stop the stream right there. I just want to go to r/Godzilla just to see, like, at the moment, what is being talked about the most at the moment. There we go. Okay. I will play devil's advocate and say I see more people talk about power scaling Godzilla than the wiring. Yeah. But no, I think that even to play devil's advocate and you say that you see more people talking about power scaling than the writing, then I think in that case, looking at by case basis, I'll be curious to see who it is that you follow and who is it that they follow. And how does that then relate to like what appears on your feed? Because I barely see power scaling on like my feeds. Most of it's either art or discussions about the movies. But even looking here, so the first thing that comes up is this. It's from 2 hours ago. Monster vs. Godzilla. This is the closest I could say to power scaling. No. I guess we can consider this also technically power scaling because it's Godzilla fighting another thing. No. Definitely no. No. Let's just do power scaling. TikTok power scalers or something else. From a year ago, 10 days ago, why I don't hate power scaling and you shouldn't too. That was 10 days ago. What are your thoughts on opinions on anti-power scaling? I wonder, let's do that there. Actually, yeah, by power scaling logic, that's like 2 years ago, a year ago. I hate the entire concept of power scaling. It makes me really go wrong on power scaling. Oh, and that's even, what's it called? That's a response to Firewood Media right there, or someone encouraging him. See, no, in power scaling. What's power scaling? What are your negative thoughts about? Like, you have to really go to find something on Godzilla guy. Let's just do, since I'm curious, let's do versus Godzilla r/ versus. 4 months ago, Evangelion, Godzilla versus Kong, Fans vs. Toho. Who's winning? That's from like, so one hypothetical power scaling battle from like a year ago, and it's Gigan versus Showa Mechagodzilla. So that's 1. 2. That's from 2 years ago. That's from the comic, so let's not count that. So the newest one 3 months ago, Godzilla versus Goku Black. 13 days ago. So that's Space Godzilla versus Destroyer. So that's a fight breakdown movie. Some art, comic. Like, even if you just put verses into it, they aren't dominated by like these different matchups. Like, I really have to be looking for them, and most of them are like from years ago. And even saying like most of God, yeah, he says most of God. Well, at least Convoy is saying most of the Godzilla subreddit hates power scaling by the looks of it. Wow, I love Godzilla r/Godzilla now. Well, it's Reddit. Don't be fooled by the fact that you're seeing things you like on Reddit. It's Reddit. Never like Reddit. Search by newest, sure. Relevance. Actually, I'll do it by hot because that's gonna see what's up first. So, because if it's by hot, that's usually means at least posts that are at least popping off. So, Cosmic Bringer versus Golden Demise. That's by, let's just do that right there. Oh, so it's just Unicron versus Ghidorah. That's that art piece that I've seen. Your souls. So, I guess we'll do that as 1. And versus is still there. Has nothing to do with a versus battle. That's a movie. That's a drawing. Comic. Talking about a movie location. Another thing about power scaling, which is King Kong versus a giant praying from that goes. Okay. Barely even Godzilla related. Figure. I guess you can consider that power scaling. That's like one thing that's like kind of considerably power scaling is this from 7 days ago. No. This one's also, I guess, maybe, but it's an animation. Not really power scaling. Not really either. This is, again, 9 days ago. Again, I really have to scroll down for this. And there's that same one that we found earlier. Clip Shadows are paired up for fights. It's funny because who the fuck is that mantis? It says from the Goosebumps movie, which I guess makes sense because it's just a giant mantis versus giant ape. Murder drones is shown by the okay. Let's see. I want to look up. Is there any other ways we can search through this? Top. Okay. So if we do by top, nothing really. That's an animation, so I don't even think that's really a discussion. But let's just even count that just for the sake of it. Art piece, again, let's just count it. Sure. Gross King. Helmet, art piece. But like, even for the sake of arguments, let's just look at this right here. Because even looking through this, there isn't a whole lot of discussion about who. We all know who will win here. It's like one person. It's from 4 years ago, and I had to scroll down to find that. OG Godzilla vs. Kong, artwork, Mecha Monkey, and nothing really there. Let's see if I can find that Space Godzilla versus Destroyer, because that one was kind of more of a power scaling related topic. So I want to see just what the general discussions were on that one, because then we could say like, oh well, the one time there is power scaling, it gets super toxic and like mods have to close it down or something. Whoop, there it is. Any for comments. Let's actually I want to see. Let's just find words. Wait, find. Nope. I'm not sure what everyone said is. There you go. That's one slightly toxic. Let's try stupid. Nope. Very 50-50. There we go. That's one. Idiots would try and tell you Destroyer will one shot. It's absolutely blurred. Obviously, if you watch. What other ones did I say, chat? Because I already did stupid. I did idiot. Let's do dumbass. Let's use the odd word. Nope. In chat, anyone's got any other like insults that you think would be common? Let's see if we can just find it through the thread. I'm just curious. You already did stupid, rated idiot, did retard, dumbass, etc. Let's see toxic. Nope. Nope. Again, it really isn't like r/Godzilla brain dead. I already brought it off cam, but let's see. Let me do brain dead. Nope. Brain dead wasn't on there either. Movie fans. Let's keep going.
Focus on movies here, but whatever. If every conversation about Godzilla versus Kong just devolves into who is stronger instead of discussing the actual movie itself, it changes how the fandom interacts with the series as a whole. Ignoring power scaling doesn't.
Well, here's another thing. When your movie doesn't have much to say or isn't really that good, it kind of makes sense that when the most interesting thing to discuss about it is who's going to win in a fight, when the movie is literally just about the fight itself. Like, some X versus X inherently encourages people to discuss and hype up who's going to win in a fight. That is what the marketing encourages you to do. So saying like, oh, if every time we're going to talk about Godzilla versus Kong, it's not about the movie, it's about who would win in a fight. That is what the filmmakers want you to do. Because let's be honest, Wingard really didn't care too much about the story. That's why even in an article, he said he was completely fine with changing Godzilla's character from how he was in King of the Monsters. Yep. Nope. Black stocks, or you could say black stocks are in the black.
Doesn't stop it from influencing discourse. If anything, it only makes the toxicity worse since no one is calling it out. The internet is rife with examples of power scaling debates spiraling into toxic outbursts.
So it can be said about movie analysis spiraling into toxic discourse. The Last Jedi, anyone? Or Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, anyone?
Common behaviors include the use of insults and derogatory terms like goon, dumbass, and yeah, I
didn't use goon, but I probably wouldn't find goon. Actually, you know what? We'll keep his face right there. I'm going to put goon in there. Nope. Goon did not come in there.
Go on, but I kind of like having a YouTube channel.
This is the story of how Pipe.
And this is Zimcast, sponsored by Pipe Dream or Pipe Drive. Yep, they're not going to bring me back as a sponsor for this one. I'm sorry.
Matchups like Orange Guy from Dragon Ball versus Bald Guy from One Punch Man have become notorious for generating intense and often toxic arguments. Extreme reactions, including instances of death threats, have been reported in particularly heated debates.
Okay, again, and there are people who have sent death threats to people over bad art in other fandoms. People have like ended themselves over threats they've received because of how they've drawn certain characters. That does not make the toxicity inherently or specifically or especially unique to power scaling as a whole.
A recurring theme is the insistence that one's personal opinion on a character's power level is an objective fact, with any disagreement met with hostility. This can lead to the creation of non-canonical arguments and the deliberate dismissal of evidence from the source material to support a desired outcome.
Wouldn't that just be bad power scaling then if you're deliberately ignoring sources? And again, that would just make the argument bad, and therefore bad power scaling if you're ignoring evidence.
The assertion that a particular character can defeat all others, or soloing entire verses, is another common and often baseless claim that fuels toxic discussions.
Yeah, there are definitely certain cases where certain characters just do that because the immense power within a universe is just above another universe. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that anyone who takes this idea that another character soloing a verse you like makes your verse inferior doesn't mean anything. There are certain contexts in which certain limitations make a story interesting in that context versus another. Like, just because the Imperium of Man beats like the UNSC from Halo in like a straight up like Empire versus Empire battle does not diminish the story of the UNSC throughout the Halo books and games. That's a poor argument.
Nothing more. Within these debates, thought-terminating arguments and logical fallacies that shut down meaningful discussion are frequently employed.
You've already made several appeals to authority and anecdotal examples which aren't really logically coherent, among other things.
Fandoms have developed reputations for their power scaling toxicity. The Dragon Ball fandom, one that I'm not a part of, I don't really know much about the show beyond it's over 9,000, has a very long history and explicit, though often inconsistent, power levels. And these have been long-standing sources of such issues. More recently, the One Punch Man fandom has also seen a rise in toxicity, mainly surrounding the seemingly limitless power of its protagonist, the bald guy. And to me, it's like, I just feel like you're missing the point, you know? Like, isn't the point of that show that he is so powerful that he almost has like an existential crisis? He's just bored as hell existing because nothing in life excites him anymore. Like, why are you more focused on like the fighting when like even the main character isn't? You know, other fandoms frequently.
I like, and inherently, what's interesting is that I don't find One Punch Man to be an interesting series because of that exact scenario. We already know Saitama is probably going to win, and more than likely, they will never betray the premise of their show, which is Guy defeats everything in a singular punch. The only things I find interesting in One Punch Man are how other characters, based on their feats and how they respond to challenges, are able to overcome their issues. I already know what Saitama is going to do, so I don't watch the show for that exact reason. There's no stakes. But like saying, oh, there's artistic merit, and like Saitama doesn't care about, so why should you? There's other things in the show besides Saitama. If it was literally just the Saitama show, I don't think anyone would find One Punch Man that interesting. Yeah, no. Literally, essentially. Oh, fans goon, all right. Oh, the goonery. That's not what goon means, goontard.
Frequently cited for toxic power scaling debates include those centered around Naruto, Bleach, Marvel Comics, and DC Comics.
Not about any other, nothing else? Really? Nothing else?
The existence of dedicated online communities on platforms like Reddit, and the power scaling subreddit highlight the prevalence of this very activity.
I also love the fact that he said Reddit, but then brings up like the Godzilla subreddit as being like rife with power scaling discussions when it took us forever to find any. And I know this video is like 13 days old, but you'd think, actually, speaking of, wow, okay, you know what's interesting, guys, is that Space Godzilla versus Destroya like versus battle thing was also 13 days ago. Let me stop. I'll show that. So let's go back. Yeah, his video was 13 days ago, and so was this versus battle. And even then, there's barely any insult. Like, there we go. Let's see fanboy. Let's see how many people say fanboy. Fanboy. Nope, just the one. I guess we also consider that an insult. This maybe, yeah, no, like literally, there's so little in the way of toxicity here. That's insane. I'd even like looking here versus Gamera for movie, same thing for movie. That's literally just specifically for Naruto power scaling to the strongest Godzillas to ever exist. Obviously, it's showing Chibi Godzilla, and we all know why that's included. Not even power scaling related for a movie. For a clip, probably not even actually power scaling. You know, let's, I'm curious. Let me do this. r/Godzilla power scaling. Is that even a subreddit? Godzilla memes, Godzilla. Nope. Let's make sure we do relevance. Just do what's hot right now. Nope. Top. Nope. New. Nope. None of these arguments are convincing. If anything, they make the point for power scaling even stronger, or just make the opposition seem really weak.
While some participants do engage with genuine attempts at analysis and debate, these spaces are ultimately echo chambers. All you're going to get are,
again, could be said for anyone who said finds a scene good or a scene impactful, as he said earlier. And this is Reddit power scaling specifically from and I assume r/power scaling.
biased opinions and hot beds of toxic behavior featuring bizarre and often nonsensical arguments.
Okay.
Even the Godzilla going to get are biased opinions and hotbeds of toxic.
Goku has spoken. What's this from? I assume it's a crossover battle. Could the Hasbin Hotel actually solo? That's just a meme. They're not even showing. I think what would be impactful, or at least would make the point better, is if you showed the post and then see every toxic examples of comments around this.
Behavior featuring bizarre and often nonsense.
Who's winning this race? Out of these characters, who's winning in a one planet run around the sun? Blue luck. Boys, I train. Immeasurable. Again, okay. I wish there was more here to demonstrate not only these arguments are pointless, but then also the fact that people are being toxic about these discussions.
Arguments. Even the Godzilla fandom is not immune to this. Given that the franchise is literally about giant monsters fighting, it makes sense that fans would argue about which kaiju is the strongest. But
so again, that does in a way undermine your entire argument. If you're saying that that these are literally about giant monsters fighting, so of course fans would do this, then yes, the concept of these movies, especially the later ones that people like to defend, are about Godzilla fighting a unique monster.
The problem is when these debates become more about proving superiority over your favorite monster than actually enjoying the movies.
But then you have to, again, this is where it comes in. You then have to prove that the majority of people who engage in power scaling do so because they just care about their favorite character being right.
Biggest points of contention.
Disney Plus is your home to.
I'm never being sponsored by Disney. Ever. Never, ever, ever. Everyone kill Hasbin Hotel because I hate Hasbin Hotel and I don't want them to win. That's what you get the Doomslayer for. Like I said before, someone was exaggerating about power scaling on Reddit. There's definitely toxic cesspools on Reddit, and there's also a lot of toxic power scaling discussions on Reddit. But if it's very easy to find, and you'd think that'd be a lot easier to show this. Hi, sorry I'm late. I don't give a fudge about power scaling anymore because it's all measuring context. That's the reason I haven't watched any fan-made battle royales such as Death Battle. Again, that is your prerogative to do so. And again, if you don't like power scaling because of those exact reasons, I think this just comes down to who you surround yourself with, because there's a lot of power scalers I like and talk to, and they're very chill people. I do have a favorite Disney princess, but it is not Elsa. No, never Elsa. I love how this one video managed to strike a nerve of one of the angriest Godzilla power scalers known to man. Gotham is always just what's it called? He always just goes in all in. He's always aggro. I respect it. I can never. I mean, I'm not old. I'm definitely older, but I don't have that kind of hater energy in me anymore. But really, the arguments that have been made so far in this video, well, we're more than halfway through it at this point. They don't really inspire a whole lot of confidence in the anti-power scaler discussion.
I feel like everyone already is waiting for me to talk about it, is the Godzilla versus Kong discourse, where some fans absolutely refuse to acknowledge that Kong played a role in saving Godzilla from Mechagodzilla at the end of Godzilla versus Kong. Take a shot every time I say Godzilla, you'll be dead by the end of this video, I promise. There's also endless bickering over.
Okay, again. Okay, that's not even power scaling. That's just bad film analysis. If anything, that's your field of analyzing the scenes and stuff.
Which version of Godzilla is the most powerful, whether that be MonsterVerse Godzilla, Showa Godzilla, Godzilla Earth. And let's not forget the bizarre tendency for some fans to downplay every other kaiju just to make Godzilla seem untouchable. What frustrates me is when...
Again, that's just poor power scaling arguments. That's not power scaling is bad.
Power scaling erases what makes these movies interesting. Take Godzilla vs. Biollante. It's not a movie about who hits harder. It's about the weird, tragic beauty of Biolante's design, the existential horror of DNA experiments gone wrong. But in a power scaling conversation, it ends up getting reduced to, well, Biollante isn't as strong as Heisei Ghidorah, so she's irrelevant.
No, that's actually an outright lie. If Ghidorah is stronger than Biollante, yes, that is the case. But does Ghidorah being stronger than Biollante make Godzilla vs. Biollante the film less impactful within the context of the film itself? No, because Ghidorah never appears in this movie. So therefore, saying Ghidorah beats Biollante is a pointless argument to make. No one is saying that, oh, Godzilla vs. Biollante, the film, is less important because she loses to King Ghidorah. That is a straw man of an argument of a straw man. Like, I would never use that. I would never plant that in my field. That would be the worst straw man ever. Again, I said it earlier, based on the feats that you can see in the films, Godzilla 54 is stronger than Godzilla -1. Just because Godzilla 54 could beat Minus in a fight does not then mean that the story of Godzilla -1 or the story of Godzilla 54 is better or worse as a result.
It's flattening art into numbers.
Again, you have not qualified that at all.
And I get it. Some fans enjoy the hypothetical fights, but when that becomes the primary conversation, it feels like we're missing out. We're reducing something strange and emotional into a math problem, and that doesn't feel like a win to me. I don't want to go on some moral crusade.
And even then, even if like the only time something is a math problem is when you're looking at characters who are so vastly stronger and weaker than one another that the math problem ultimately decides the outcome of a fight. If you have two characters who are relatively similar in power, then you get an interesting fight. That is why the idea of the mismatch is so common, because a lot of characters you think would be comparable to one another are not that comparable. Like Master Chief versus Doom Guy is an interesting fight because you have two green space marines fighting against each other. That is a fun matchup idea, but it is horribly mismatched given the fact that Master Chief exists in a universe that is more down to earth, more realistic, while the Doomslayer is essentially a god fighting against other gods. Just because they are two space marines does not mean that they would then make an even fun fight. Doom Guy is just objectively stronger, but that does not diminish Chief's story or his accomplishments.
It against power scaling. If it's your thing, enjoy it. But for me, I'm more interested in what these movies say, how they make me feel, and why they're still compelling after all these years.
And again, that power scaling can enhance or diminish that. That does not mean anything.
That's the kind of conversation that I'd rather have. I recently made a community poll on my channel where I asked the following question. What are your thoughts on power scaling? I've made my opinion on it very clear, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. Sound off in the comments. And the response was an overwhelming 68% stating they disliked power scaling, while only 32% liked power scaling. Here are some of the top comments from that post, and very friendly reminder that if you'd like to be featured in one of these videos, subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for community posts just like these. One commenter, Indominus Gojira, stated, I enjoy who would win discussions, but I think too many people ruin the fun and take it too seriously. Meanwhile, on the more positive side, YouTube user DPB Edits stated, I enjoy it. Prefer just using feats and statements, but otherwise it's all right. It just gets mad annoying when people who can't scale for shit come into the discussion and say, oh, he's boundless. While Goji Gav 2002 commented, I love power scaling, but some people in the Godzilla community ignore statements and glaze other monsters just so that their side can win.
Yep, I mean that's a pretty fair distribution of like and dislike. So I would say that's an example. I would say that's a good example of him highlighting people within his community.
Finally, another user, Itchy Bones, commented the following. Every who would win scenario depends on the person who's writing up the scenario. If either character wins, it will be based on the opinion of the person writing it.
That just means that's just bad writing.
As well as how complex they make the fight. For example, it's obvious that Godzilla has a weapon that will easily kill Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong, but because of the director, the fight lasted longer. He could have even made Kong win. It would have been up to him. Taking all of this into consideration when talking about power scaling, if both characters have the ability to kill each other in different scenarios, it's up to the individual to decide who would win, no matter how crazy it may seem to others.
Yeah, well, in that case, you just have to make sure that your characters actually are presented in the context of their worlds to be of equal strength. If you're saying a character is so vastly inferior and you don't explain any way, shape, or form how a character was able to overcome another, and you just said, oh, because I wanted him to win, that's just poor writing. At that point, it stops being about power scaling, and it just becomes how bad you are as a writer.
Personally, I think Itchy Bones makes a pretty good argument here, and that brings me to my next point, and it starts with a quote from the legendary comic book writer, Stan Lee.
This is an appeal to authority, and here's the Stan Lee quote.
When asked about hypothetical battles between his creations, Lee famously stated, who would win in a fight if Galactus fought the Hulk, or Thor fought Iron Man? And there's one answer to all of that. It's so simple. Anyone should know this. The person who'd win in a fight is the person that the scriptwriter wants to win. That's it. That's the whole truth. These characters...
And the thing is that taking that that quote as literally into the letter of his statement, that has nothing to do with whether the fight can be well written or anything like that. If the person wants character A to win, they will win regardless. And that is an example of bad art or anti-art, actually, because you're taking the base idea that you've come up with your head. You are not accounting for the factors that are at play, given the other tools and other characters within the world you presented with, and you just want the scenario to happen the way you want it to. It is essentially, definitionally, putting a square peg into a round hole and shoving it in there as hard as you can because you want the intended scenario to occur the way you wanted it to.
Characters don't have fixed power levels. They have whatever strength the story needs them to have. Spider-Man could beat the Thing if the writer wants him to. It's fiction. There's no definitive answer. And that's why power scaling as a concept is inherently flawed, because it ignores the fundamental nature of storytelling. Beyond that, power scaling's obsession with stats
and the fundamental nature of storytelling is that the writer can do anything, which then leads to the question is, why should the writer be allowed to do anything, especially if they're constrained by a world? Like Godzilla could, hypothetically, shoot rainbows out of his ass. That is something that could happen, and the writer could say, well, I want it to happen, so it happened. That could cut through so much tension, lore, backstory, etc. But because the writer wanted it, by the nature of it being art and what the person wanted, it could happen. Oh god, it's fiction. Yeah. Is it weird for me to say that power scaling enhances how one views a character in film? It basically makes us remember that one rinkadink silly dude is actually an island buster or something. To a degree, yeah. Again, just if you are writing a story and you're dealing with fantastical powers, just be aware of the limitations of your powers. Like, don't be definitive in certain cases. Don't say this is ultimately where this character can like top off at. They can never get stronger than this or can only do this. Like, be open, be a little free with your characters, and you can surprise yourself with the scenarios you can think up.
hypothetical fights really just sucks the joy out of fiction. When every discussion becomes about measuring power scales, people stop appreciating the actual artistry of the work. Great.
And again, if we're looking at purely at Godzilla, r/Godzilla, which you used as an example, it was very few and far between we found actual discussions about power scaling. And the most relevant one that we found was extremely sparse with insults and just discussions.
Characters and moments get dismissed just because they're not the strongest. People decide a movie sucks because Godzilla lost a fight that he should have won, and feats get ripped out of context, leading to absurd conclusions.
Again, I think there's so much baked into that premise. Like, is a film bad because Godzilla lost a fight he should have won? In the context of everything presented would state that Godzilla should win regardless of the intended result of the author, then yeah, that could be a fault within the narrative, not just power scaling. And the same could be inverse. This case where Godzilla shouldn't have won that fight because of X or Y reason. I think that the only reason why he's saying it's bad is because it's in favor of Godzilla winning instead of losing. So
it turns storytelling into a rigid numbers game, when in reality, storytelling thrives on unpredictability and creative choices. For instance, a viewer might deem a movie sucks because Godzilla, typically portrayed as immensely powerful, was defeated by an opponent who, according to power scaling metrics, should have been inferior. This reaction ignores the potential for clever strategy, environmental factors, or narrative contrivances that the writer employed to create a compelling story.
Well, contrivances aren't good. A contrivance is an inherently negative thing. Like circumstances, environmental factors, things like that can lead to a weaker character defeating a stronger character because you are leveraging things within the story. But a contrivance to allow a character to win is never a good thing because it is a minor error within a story that is allowing for the intended outcome. And if you want your story to have the verisimilitude that most writers and most creatives are going for to make the viewer believe that what is happening actually is happening within the world and not just a construction of sets and actors, then again, power scaling has value.
Story. Furthermore, power scaling often involves stripping feats and statements from their original context. A single impressive feat might be taken as an absolute measure of a character's power, ignoring instances where they are portrayed as significantly weaker or the specific circumstances that allowed for that exceptional display.
Again, that'll be an example of someone just power scaling bad and not someone power scaling in general.
Ultimately, the outcome of many fictional fights is dictated by the needs of the plot. That's literally how...
And again, if it's by the needs of the plot, then if your plot can't support the narrative and the conclusions or set pieces you want in your story, then maybe your plot just isn't good, which would therefore be a writing issue, which is something that you talk about, which would then, once again, justify the use of power scaling.
Storytelling works. An overemphasis on power scaling leads to a less engaging and honestly a more predictable experience of fiction. When fans become overly fixated on predetermined hierarchies of strength, the potential for unexpected outcomes and the element of
I want to go back to what he just said.
Storytelling works. An overemphasis on power scaling leads to a less engaging and honestly a more predictable experience of fiction.
And again, he mentions earlier when you're talking about things like feats, statements, special abilities, which he calls hacks. This is why I think in general, having hacks abilities in a world are good, because it disrupts a just linear hierarchy of power, because if characters can bypass certain aspects of a character's durability or strength, it can allow for these engaging scenarios. So then it is not just a slugfest between two people based on a linear hierarchy, and that allows for the ambiguity that people like in their fiction. People who power scale dinosaurs, especially the paleoacro ones, drive me insane. Godzilla 8 Aragon confirmed. I hate when power skills go for real life animals. I hate them more than clobbering two fiction animals, because then we get stuff like Tier Zoo. I find, like, here's the thing. I find Tier Zoo funny. I don't think that like any of his like tiers of like, oh, this animal goes in A or B tier because of this or that reason. I think that is literally just his bit, because he is treating them like a video, like taking adaptations, things like that, and turning them into a video game, which inherently is part of the fun of that. I never ever taking what he said to be like, oh, this is an objective power scaling because of this or that factor. Outside of I think the one time he did like a quote unquote power scaling video, I think it was like a gorilla versus like a bear, I believe. I haven't watched Tier Zoo in a long time, but there's that. I can't stand paleoarch people in general. Yeah, paleo. We don't like paleos around here. Paleos are silly people. They're the glup shadows, the little clown boys of any community that they're in. In your case, Black, to answer your power scaling question, I'm not putting that on the screen. I'd love to, but I can't. The Austrian man wins. His Blitzkrieg solos. It soloed France. So I think that, yeah, as well as Pol Pot, I said the name. Pot's AC feat is that he sends all of his intelligent people to build trenches. So essentially he kneecapped his intelligence stats. So therefore Austrian man wins and solos easily.
When fans become overly fixated on predetermined hierarchies of strength, the potential for unexpected outcomes and the element of surprise, which are very important in storytelling.
Back to the Future in Boston. I guess I'm being sponsored by them. But no, predictable outcomes do not necessarily aren't necessarily important to stories. They can be interesting, but they are not needed. A predictable outcome can still be good, even if you know it's going to happen. It's just about execution.
Strength, the potential for unexpected outcomes and the element of surprise, which are very important in storytelling, are diminished. They don't exist. While I do have my own problems with power scaling, especially ones that I've mentioned so far, I do think that it is important to acknowledge some counter arguments and the notion that for some, it can be a harmless form of entertainment, which is entirely fair. For some people, power scaling is a lighthearted hobby, a way to connect with friends and fellow fans, and a form of imaginative play through what-if scenarios. I've said it before and I'll say it again here. I do not take issue with normal individuals casually enjoying this activity if it brings them pleasure, even if I don't like it myself. If you're a normal person, you like power scaling, then hell yeah, dude, keep at it. Just keep it away from me and my channel. That's all I ask. However, the crucial point is where the seemingly harmless fun transforms into toxicity, when it encroaches upon other aspects of fandom and affects personal interests. Even if some people engage in power scaling without malice, the broader culture surrounding it still fosters an environment that is...
Again, the broader culture of film analysis still encourages toxic discussions of media, so that argument is still a poor one.
Toxic and exclusionary. Another argument that I've heard get thrown around in favor of power scaling is that it's a tool for identifying inconsistencies in a story's power levels and character abilities. And I disagree. I think that while acknowledging that consistency can be a desirable element in storytelling, an excessive focus on a rigid power scale leads to unproductive nitpicking and a failure to appreciate the artistic license and fluidity inherent in creative works. As Stan Lee's quote emphasizes, writers prioritize
appeal to authority by using the Stan Lee quote again, as well as, once again, if you are acknowledging the existence of character abilities, there is never always going to be a rigid hierarchy of power, because there will be cases where a writer can come up with scenarios, abilities, etc. that can bypass a rigid power scale because of X or Y reason, as long as it's presented in a way that accurately and logically within the universe that they have created can be explained. Simple as.
The narrative, and apparent inconsistencies can often be attributed to the needs of the story rather than errors in some objective power scale.
So I said, again, square peg, round hole.
Don't get me wrong, though. If a Porg beat Luke Skywalker in a fight, then yeah, that's stupid. But when you bring...
That's power scaling. That is literally power scaling. And again, that is not stupid, because if a porg beat Luke Skywalker in a fight, that is the author's intention of how they wanted the story to go. And saying that it doesn't that's stupid is being anti-art, because it is going against the artistic license and interpretation that they wanted to go for with that fight. That it is now only 2 minutes left in the video and another contradiction. Idea for the chibi shirt. Simple as might work. So right now we're either saying it's either going to be simple as or movie fan. Those are going to be the two. So I'll probably put that up to a poll. And someone asked, any reason why the hate to paleos? I'm confused. No, just generally the thing is, since I'm not even really a dinosaur channel, but paleo is just terms for people who have a rigid feelings about paleo accuracy when it comes to certain dinosaurs, how they're portrayed, how they're sounded, colored, etc. Because even though we do know a lot about these animals, there's still a whole lot that people don't understand. Many scientists in the field will objectively just say we don't know this or that about certain dinosaur, but people who are paleo fans will say, nope, this is exactly how it is, based on their own personal interpretations of it. Where does it go? That's right, it goes in the square hole. Oh, wait, I saw the winner in a fight mostly depends on who has the better trait adaptability. Hey, Battletech, that's definitely the case. And it might ruin the movie for someone if the power level doesn't match with what someone might imagine how strong the character can be. That can be the case, yeah. But it's also the case, too, that even if like a character is displaying something that is impressive, but not as impressive as a character as like people think that character should be, there's also cases where they say something is impressive and it is actually woefully unimpressive. There is that as well.
Break down fictional abilities to the point of staring at pixels on a screen and then getting mad at something that no normal person cares about, then we have a problem. Ultimately,
again, exceptions that prove the rule that most people aren't like that.
Analyzing a story through the lens of thematic consistency and character arcs has the potential of
thematic consistency would then also, if there's conflict in a story, tie into power scaling,
giving the viewer a much more enriching and insightful experience than obsessing over the precise quantification of power levels. To me, that just seems like a downright weird way to consume media, and it comes off as being very, very anti-art.
Third time he said it, and he's never qualified it throughout this entire video, and he won't qualify it within the next couple of minutes.
At the end of the day, I care about what these movies mean, not how high a character ranks on an imaginary tier list. And
yeah, but if you care about what these movies mean, you know for a fact that there is a certain attention for what these movies mean, but what they mean to other people is never going to be a strict, simple thing. So it's just as subjective as the power scaling that you're arguing against.
On the overwhelming response from my community, I know that I'm not alone in that. At the end of the day, the monsters in these movies don't care who's stronger. They're here to destroy buildings, to roar, and to sometimes dropkick each other across a field. Maybe we should do that.
Nope, there's the Megalon mention again. But again, I believe wholeheartedly, and this is me making an assumption, that most of the people who do not like power scaling don't like the concept of power scaling. They just like people being toxic. Simple as. And yeah, maybe simple as might be the choice for the little quote on the shirt, but really it is just that. I think most people are more upset about the fact that someone called them an idiot or a loser one time in a power scaling debate, and then they threw it all outright because of that, and less to do with actually finding the idea in practice to be less than desirable.
Do the same thing. Metaphorically, of course. With all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. This is a very long video that's been in the works for a while, and I just had a lot that I really wanted to say and kind of get off my chest. And if you disagree, I'm sure there's going to be a very big group of people that will disagree with this video, which is fine. I don't care. Feel free to leave a comment. Just be respectful.
Again, don't care, but I think that just like with the Antibolini Tortellini, anytime there's a contentious issue, when they realize they're probably going to get some backlash, you always hear the famous, I do not care. But obviously they do care. He wouldn't have made an entire video, done all the editing if he didn't care about the topic. He just doesn't care about responses to the video because it doesn't agree with it, what it is he has to say. And I'm completely fine with that. It is what it is. And we've come to the end of the video, guys. So we'll leave for the last couple minutes. If anyone's got any other thoughts they want to say before the video ends. Again, you know where to find me. Twitter, Patreon, which in that case for Patreon, if you are being so generous, Kaiju Quarantine, that is going to be the big thing on the channel. in terms of exclusive stuff that you will see. And I really hope a lot of people will sign up for that. It will mean a lot to me since it's something I'm working on. It's going to mean a lot to me in terms of the story I want to tell. And again, exclusive videos, they're not going to be the main thing. So don't be confused or concerned. I'm not going to slow the uptake of shorts or live streams or anything like that. It's just another thing I'm going to take on because I want to provide both free and then exclusive content. And then, of course, when the book is out, I'll provide links to that. And of course, at the moment, Simple As or Movie Fan are the two little blurbs I'm going to put here for the Chibi Zim shirt. If anyone has anything else that they've heard me say before and think that might be interesting, I would love to hear it. But again, you guys know where to find me. Any other videos in the works? So, is Rodan or how or why Rodan is a well-designed kaiju? The video has already been, the edits have been done. I just need to start recording that and start doing the editing for that. So that's going to be done soon. There is a short about a new kaiju manga that I picked up for my work, and I'm going to be advertising that and doing a video on it as well. Oh, that's another one that could work. Neither here nor there. Yeah, that's another one. So neither here nor there, Simple As, and Movie Fan. And then as for other videos that I'm working on, there is Exidio, the kaiju video game that's going to be getting a review. When I get back to playing more Dawn of the Monsters, I will probably be doing a review on that. And yeah, that's probably the main things I'm working on. The 98 retrospective, I've been writing that as well, but I think because I really want to dedicate a lot of time and effort to that, I'm already past the upload time I wanted to do for that. So that's probably going to be next year, maybe. Or if I get it done this year, I'll post it whenever. And there is something Zim related that's going to be related to G-Fest. I'm going to be very excited to show those. So those are going to be edited up when I am already away in Chicago. So that's going to be fun, and you guys will get to watch that. And then there is going to be a G-Fest vlog. So I got a device that's going to help me record. So that camera is going to be nice. And that means I'm not going to have to store as much stuff on like my iPad or my phone. And that'll allow me to do more footage and sort of really go into the weeds when it comes to getting stuff for G-Fest, editing those up. And whether depending on what actually happens in terms of who I see, how much of my time or attention is taken away from me, you might get daily uploads. So you might get like a G-Fest day 1, day 2, day 3, then an aftermath that may take a little longer, but we'll see. So those are definitely not like going to happen. Those are going to be more tentative, and they're definitely going to be very much like up in the air. I also have a Godzilla unscripted video that I am working on. I have 2 actually in the works. One related to Godzilla the character, and then another about like the movies. So those are going to be fun. Respect and appreciate the few people like you pointing out the hypocrisy and inconsistencies with anti-power skills. If they don't like, they shouldn't, and just engage with the content. Thank you, I appreciate it. Characters you get some high scale like Solar System reunions because they beat a character from the universe who scale there, to be honest. Yeah, again, like I feel that as someone who used to power scale do versus stuff back in the day, not to like a super duper extent, at a certain point, if you are not finding value in what it is that you're taking part in, just don't engage. Like, really do not. It's not worth your time. It's not worth your energy. Find what it is that you do take enjoyment in and do that. Or if what it is that you enjoy is plagued by people that you don't like being around, forge a community for your own and you'll find like-minded people. That's another thing. When's the next Kaiji versus video? It was supposed to be Gigan versus Zigra. And yeah, we're not even going through like all the scaling chain stuff. Gigan wins. But I thought that was like a fun video to do back in the day, but that's never happening probably. I'm going to go continue work on my upcoming Mr. Who video. Good night. Thank you, Sea Monster. Good to see you guys. I'm going to be honest. I agree that we should expand on our scientific understanding of prehistory. I love the classic depictions of dinosaurs. Yeah, no, I understand that. But I'm going to sign off, guys. I thank you so much. It's been fun. Stay tuned for the next one. We're going to be talking about the kaiju zeitgeist and sort of when a movie is or is not being talked about. That's going to be Zimcast 97 and then Zimcast 98, where Godzilla enters the public domain. I will not elaborate. You will learn about what we mean by that come Zimcast 98, whenever that is. This has been Zim on the Zimcast. Have a good one, guys. And as always,
Semper Fi, motherfucker.